Welcome to the Sales Development Podcast, your trusted resource for the latest strategies, tactics, and tips on running a high-performance sales development program. Sales development has grown to become a critical part of the success of high-growth companies, and we dive in each week on how to specifically make your program successful and accelerate your career advancement. Subscribe at iTunes, YouTube, and jump on the newsletter over at Tenbound.com to make sure you never miss an episode.
For some companies, CRM is worth its weight in gold. For others, it's just another monthly cost. Revenue Grid captures data to your CRM automatically and uses it to give you better prospecting, faster sales, and better pipeline visibility. Grab a demo over at RevenueGrid.com to see how your CRM can pay off. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I am very excited to introduce my next guest. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. Mr. Neil Ringers, EVP of North America at Revenue Grid. How are you doing today, Neil?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to dive in. I want to talk with you about sales engagement. And, you're with Revenue Grid now. How did you get into this? How did you become the EVP over at Revenue Grid? What's your background?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, I've been in CRM really most of my life. I've been at companies that people tend to forget about, but one of them that I started up with was a company called Vantive that got bought by PeopleSoft. And then Siebel came along and dominated the market and almost coined the phrase CRM, the acronym at least. And then went to a couple startups and went to a company called TOA Technology, which was very deep into field service, which is really the final mile from a CRM perspective. And we were bought by Oracle. And then after Oracle, I went to Salesforce. So I think I've been to almost every major CRM company or understand every major CRM company. And, my days at Salesforce were very, very interesting because I got to get a really good understanding of the breadth of CRM and the overall footprint of CRM and the motion of sales and what it should be and what it shouldn't be. And then, listen, I just got the hankering for another startup and just went into the marketplace and looked around. And I was really intrigued by Revenue Grid and what we were doing, both from a sales productivity perspective, but also, their interest in the sales enablement space because it's a relatively new product for Revenue Grid. And then the quickness of just building a marketplace really got me excited and knew I wanted to be part of that rocket ship. So here I am.
Now, one thing you didn't mention ACT. Remember ACT? That was like, because I'm from back in the day. That was one that I remember being like, wow, this is a game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've seen the real evolution of this industry. When you think about sales engagement and the sales engagement platform, how do you define that, and how is it different from a CRM?
Yeah. So if you go back a few years, you had products like Pardot and Eloqua and these big marketing email tools that were just frankly pushing emails out to a large amount of prospects and customers. And they were coming from the marketing department, right? The messaging was owned by marketing. The tool was essentially owned by marketing. And if salespeople ever got, their fingers on it, they were quickly pulled off because, no one wanted the salespeople to be sending out messages to a large customer base or prospect base. It was strictly a tool that was bought, acquired, and then ran by marketing. So then, companies like SalesLoft got into the space and Outreach got into the space, and they realized that, maybe the people that should be owning the message would be the salespeople, and maybe not just the salespeople, the BDRs and the LDRs and the SDRs and the XDRs, whatever it may be, right? And so it was time to build velocity, but let's make sure that the salespeople own the tool and own the messaging and own how we now call what sequences are and how to build out those sequences through different channels. So you could kind of see this evolve from a marketing tool to more of a sales tool. And this is really all about building velocity and building pipeline.
Okay. And why do you think sales engagement has become so required now? It almost feels like it's required, at least in the sales development world. Why has it become almost like a requirement?
Yeah, it's getting there. I mean, I would say, sales engagement is almost as important as CRM, right? Because at the end of the day, we all have to sell, right? Sales, drives the revenue of the organization, and they pay for the back office employees of the company, and whatever business you're in, you're going to have to build revenue, and you're going to have to drive revenue, and you're going to have to sell something. So I think with the salesperson, which I've always said, who kind of own their message, they're the CEO of their own territory, you're putting really powerful tools in the hands of the person that ultimately, owns the revenue number and then ultimately owns the messaging. I think that's why this has become so popular, and it's really a must-have in the marketplace as far as tools are concerned. If I'm a buyer, an IT buyer, an operational buyer, or even a sales revenue buyer of tools in the marketplace, you have to put sales enablement on your list as far as something that you have to have in your bag, because your competition is. And if your competition is, you should have the same tools, if not better.
Okay, so this is a very powerful tool. I mean, right? Because I remember as an SDR manager, all of a sudden my VP walks up to me with this cadence, email that one of my reps sent, and he's like, "Did you guys send this?" So it's a very powerful tool, right? And like you said, in the old days, only marketing was allowed to have this tool. It wasn't put into the hands of the SDR team. So what should people be, it's giving people this very powerful tool. How should we think about enabling everybody to use it correctly?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So I think when you look at a company and you start off with this very powerful tool, you look to places like your BDRs, your business development reps, because their goal is to build pipeline and pass off leads to the sales team, right? So that's a really great place to start. And then this is going to proliferate throughout the organization. And because this tool is very powerful, you got to put guardrails on it. So as a manager and as a leader of an organization, the last thing you want to do is upset your customers and continuing to send them emails on a hourly, daily, weekly basis, right? At one point, it's enough's enough, right? So you've got to make sure as part of your process that you're not sending out message upon message upon message to your prospects and your customers, because they'll just turn off to it. So you have to be really strategic and really creative on how you actually build out these sequences and these steps to the sequences, and not overloading your prospects or customers with, irrelevant messaging. That's why when you put it in the hands of a very strategic, creative salesperson, that message gets through. And you'll see that because most sales enablement tools have activity tracking, and you can understand who opened them, who forwarded them, who clicked on them, how many times did they actually open that. So then you start to build up a follow-up campaign, right? So once you start getting all this information, you do really realize how powerful this tool is, and how if you overuse it, you could turn a lot of people away.
Big time. I think people, they just get kind of immune to the messaging after a while. So in your best practice, do you think who should be writing the messages and kind of controlling the drip of the cadence or the sequence? Should it be a marketer? Should it be the actual salesperson or the BDR? Who should do that?
It just depends on the culture of the company, right? If you've got a company that is really dominated by marketing and that company has to own every single message that goes out, then I think, marketing is going to own that, and they're going to collaborate with the salespeople, and hopefully the salespeople are getting their messaging involved in the process as well. So it really does depend on the size of the organization, the culture of the organization, of actually who is owning that messaging. But again, this isn't part of what you're already doing, right? If you look at these marketing tools, they haven't gone away, right? So they're still happening. This is just an additional, tool to proliferate your message through different channels. And it's not just email. It's when you're adding steps to sequences, your first step might be an email, but your second step might be a phone call. And if you're tied into your telecommunications product, your switch, you can outbound call, right? And make sure you're following up on the initial email. Your third step might be an SMS, right? So if you're utilizing the right channels and you're doing this properly from a process perspective, it's a tool where you can coexist between, a Pardot and an Eloqua and a sales enablement tool.
Got it. And it's a great productivity tool, right, for the sales rep or the SDR, BDR, because it sort of has a to-do list, right? When they come in the morning, they can see, okay, now it's time to call, now it's time to email, et cetera, right?
Exactly. And if you've got a good system, where at Revenue Grid, we have a product called Revenue Guide, and we're actually adding signals to that process. So I could actually send a signal out to my sales rep to follow up on this particular email, or I could send a signal to one of my BDRs to follow up on an SMS that went out 3 days ago. So you're kind of guiding your sales team into doing the right things throughout the process of the sales cycle. And you're just having kind of, essentially a digitized sales leader that's helping push along the salespeople throughout that sales process. So
Got it.
Yeah,
And
technology is important.
it's super important. And I was going to ask you, so from a leadership perspective, if you're managing teams of salespeople and SDRs, how does it support you with that kind of reporting and dashboards and things like that, so you can track of what's going on?
Oh yeah, it's important, right? And it's got to be easy to use, right? Because you're putting this technology really in the hands of the salespeople. When we talked about that earlier, right? That kind of power in the hands of a sales tool. A salesperson can get, convoluted at times, but also, when you put these dashboards in front of SDRs and BDRs and LDRs, right? It's got to be something that makes sense to them, right? And it's going to be easy to use, and it's got to be intuitive, right? So I don't need to be training, my SDRs and BDRs on how to build the reporting out for my sales enablement tool. I want this to be a dashboard that they open up every morning and they know what their job is, to follow up on the emails that I sent, to follow up on the SMSs that I sent, or the phone calls that I sent, or the tasks that need to be followed up on based on the signals that are sent. So, obviously there's a lot to do, but if you make it easier for your SDRs to kind of drive down through the pipeline, then that's going to be productive, and it's going to save you money, and it's going to build revenue. So yeah,
100%.
the more intuitive the technology, the better it's going to be for everybody.
Not having a real understanding of your pipeline makes forecasting unreliable and planning impossible. Revenue Grid uses auto-captured email and calendar data to x-ray your pipeline. Request a demo over at revenuegrid.com and see your opportunities like never before. So, in the past, before there were SDRs and BDRs, the sales rep would handle the whole sales process, right? And so with a sales enablement tool like this, could they go back to just handling the whole thing? Because, if you look at the way that it's structured now, it's SDRs and BDRs, and then there's sales reps, and they've got almost like two separate jobs. But is it better to go back to the old way, or is there value in having separate departments?
Well, it's hard to go back, right? Like if I go back, I remember the days where, I was in a sales role and they threw you out into the wolves, and, you sold and you knocked on doors and you picked up the phone, and every Monday morning you would get into a roll calling situation with everybody in your division, and you would tell them how much revenue you had for the week, how many calls that you made for the week, how many appointments that you had for the week, right? That was just what salespeople did. They had the whole kit and caboodle, like you mentioned. Now we're in a world of, hey, the sales executive is king, and we're going to feed them with all the leads that we can, and they're hopefully going to have the best closing ratio of anybody in the company. And so the more leads that I feed these guys, the more deals that they can close, right? So I think that's the right model. If you're creating enough leads as a SDR team or BDR team, that means that you're going to have to scale accordingly from a sales executive perspective. So your growth path is going to get bigger and faster. So I think those are all good things in these times, right? Especially for small companies that, are dealing with valuations and raising funds, and the quicker you grow, the more valuation that you're going to get, and that's a good thing. So I don't think we can ever go back. I think the model is really in place to feed the salespeople with leads that they can close quicker and faster. It's hard to imagine that we've got sales cycles that still last, 2 years in the technology business, but you'd be surprised that there are deals that I had at Salesforce that, they probably had 5 reps in between 4 years, and the last rep closed it, and that guy was a hero. But what happened to the 3 other ones before them, right? So,
Wow. Okay.
one wants a 4-year sales cycle, right? So the quicker that you make that sales cycle, and if the SDRs can help with that, then it's good for everybody.
Got it. Okay. So there's two things. There's like driving pipeline and setting the SDRs are doing, right? They're setting appointments. They're hopefully creating pipeline, that supports the overall revenue number. And then there's also like the career path. A lot of companies look at it as a career path where you can hire someone really bright and bring them in, and they're an SDR for a year or two, and then they become a sales rep. So are both of those, in your experience, viable value creators for a company? So the pipeline and the career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great point, right? So at the end of the day, if you look at companies and what they're trying to achieve, and most every company, people is first, right? So you're trying to build a culture, and you're trying to build it with the right people. So bringing people in, younger people in, that have the right culture and they have the right profile, they have the right resume, but they're just not ready yet. So you can put them into a low-cost role that's bringing a lot of value to the sales team. And they're, it's on-the-job training. So they're understanding what the messaging is, they're understanding what the value proposition is, and they're articulating that over time, and they're gaining confidence. Who better to get into the next sales role than the SDR, the BDR that's been at your company for the past 3 years, right? So it's an absolute way to build pipeline of human resources. So I think that's what a lot of companies are doing right now. And depending on how deep your pockets are, they're going to have a massive team of SDRs and BDRs just to fill the roles of the AEs that are either being promoted into management leadership roles or moving on to other companies or moving up in the organization. If they've got a pipeline of people culturally that makes sense for your company, and then, they understand the messaging, you're going to get them up sooner and faster. That's a good thing.
So it still works. And what about the sales reps though? I mean, are they still prospecting or, and I know it depends obviously on the company, but just overall in general, like in the tech industry, in the SaaS industry, are the account executives still prospecting, and are they still using the sales engagement platform, or is it just 100% the SDRs?
I mean, I think salespeople are smart and they're opportunistic, right? So they want to work the deals that they know they're going to make them money. So I think at every level, you've got a good AE that's always prospecting and thinking of ways of getting into accounts and opportunities, that are going to make them money. But at the same time, the SDRs are, they're made for, filling the coffers of the pipeline. So, I think the role now for an AE is kind of known that they're part of your job is not prospecting. You're going to get leads passed to you. And that's kind of, part of the allure of coming into an AE role. You don't have to prospect anymore because no one really likes to prospect, right? But, I think it should be part of their motion. It's not a big part of it. But I do think that in these new models where we're seeing a lot of SDRs and BDRs that are passing leads on to the AEs, a lot of the old prospecting that we used to do as AEs is gone by the wayside.
And do you still do the roll call from your back in the day, or is there like some sort of electronic version of the roll call?
Yeah, it's all electronic now. You're either doing that in Salesforce or Dynamics or Oracle, whatever your CRM platform is. That's the weekly motion.
Okay, got it. And so for you, just flipping the script a little bit, as a sales leader, you're dealing with a lot of problems right now, and, you may be open to solutions. How are you prospected to, and what do you respond to versus just ignore, in your daily life?
That's a great question. And I think that it's a great lesson for any SDR or BDR to know that the kind of messages that people like myself are opening are the ones that are personable, right? That they know me and they've done the research and they go back through my profile of LinkedIn or Facebook or what have you. And they, they're smart, right? They'll say something from my old university, right? Or if I played a sport, maybe say, hey, I'm a baseball player too, love to have a catch, would you mind if I pitched my product to you, right? Something like
good.
that. And
Yeah.
a little bit of humor goes a long way, but the personalization is absolutely the most important part of this. And that holds true when you're building sequences as well. You have to spend time on these. You have to do the research. You have to understand the company because you only get one chance. And, for these companies that are just sending out literally random messages, those don't get through. But the ones that are personalized and that understand and take a personal approach to this are the ones that are going to be successful. People will click on it, people will respond, and you'll give people credit for being creative, right? At least I do.
100%. And then does it come down to sort of the first hurdle is it has to be somewhat personalized. There's got to be some kind of context. Then you open it. Then the next thing is, are you looking for something like that right now? Or would you take a meeting with someone just to, not to waste your time, but just to get briefed on something that you might need at some point? Or is it always like, I need this right now, and this person just happened to get through to me, so let's go ahead and set up the meeting?
Not likely. If I'm not looking for it, there's not enough time in the day to be getting demos from things that you're just never going to buy, right? But if the message is very creative and it's just a good day, maybe have the time, some people will get through, right? And then they'll hold that spot. And if that BDR or SDR, whoever that may be, if they're really good, they're going to put you on a call sheet and they'll continue to call and be respectful of your time. And then maybe one day you will be ready and you will buy. And that takes a long process, but typically you got to be in the right place at the right time. That's why, this kind of building pipeline velocity world is so important. You're just reaching so many people with so many messages, whereas, I could only do so much on email, one-on-one marketing. Now I can send out 500 emails to every one email that I was sending out before. And so you're just catching people at the right time. It's a numbers game. And if you're playing the numbers game right and you're personalizing the messages correctly, your odds of getting the right person at the right time that's ready to buy just goes up. So
100%. That's something that we hear a lot from BDRs and SDRs and sales reps too. It's just part of the job is like you get a lot of rejection, and you just have to realize that, hey, it might have been the best personalized message and it's just not the right time.
Yeah.
But it seems like, and not take it personally, that's like sales 101 because it just wasn't the right time for the guy.
Exactly.
And then, it seems like with the sales enablement platform, you can keep the conversation going, right? So you can reach out, it's not the right time, but call me back in 3 months. And then you put that into the system, right? And it'll ping you in 3 months and say, okay, it's time to call back Neil.
Absolutely.
Right? That's kind of how it works?
No doubt about it. And I think if you're using the right channels, right, through your sales enablement tool, it's important not just to be single threaded through email, right? Or single threaded through the phone. You've got to do all of them. And so you might, again, what we were talking about before, it could be an email at first, it could be a phone call to follow up, and then it could be an SMS, right? We all have our phones tethered to our body 24/7. And if someone sends me a message that's creative and is personal and they send it to my text, because not a lot of people have my cell phone. So if they have that, then kudos to them for getting that. And then if they send a message that, hits the mark, then I'll talk to them. So I think just channel engagement is really, really important. And if you're doing all those things right, again, the odds of you being successful go up.
Right. Because eventually, it could be the right time for the conversation. Yeah. And if you're not in the arena, you're not going to be considered. So you got to keep plugging away, man. That's sales, right?
Exactly. if I don't have the cell phone number of the person that's going to buy from me, then they're probably not going to buy from me. So it's just one more tip to any SDR or BDR that's out there. Get the decision maker's cell phone. It's
Yeah.
always,
And, it used to be kind of taboo. Like it was kind of weird. How'd you get my cell phone? But do you think now with the crisis and the fact that everybody's working from home remotely, that the cell phone taboo is kind of lifted?
I think so. Yeah. And I think a lot of people protect their cell phone number too. So, it's not out there, but it's out there to the people that you want it to be. And if someone gets it and, they have a good message and they send it to me, then they'll get through, right? If they don't, they don't. I can easily hit the decline button. So,
Got it. Okay.
yeah.
Nice. There's a pro tip. And let me ask you, this is a little bit, this might start to come up, but what do you do in the case where you have a sales engagement, sales enablement platform plugged in? You're not super happy with it. How hard is it to rip it out and put in a new one?
It's not that hard. It's doable, but you never want to replace something that you've purchased in the past and you've kind of put your reputation to. So you want to give these tools the best shot that you can. And I think that's why it's important to buy from companies that have, previous success in the marketplace, right? So, Revenue Grid has got a customer list that's been tried and true for us for years. We've been in the space for a long time. We've supported our customers. We've got the right funding. We've got the right, support staff to be able to support an enterprise motion. Those are the kind of things that I would look for if I'm buying solutions, so that the odds of you pulling it out in, the first 8 months or the first year are very, very low. And then you have to have your processes straight, right? So if you've got your processes straight, you've got the right people involved in the project, and you're implementing it properly, the odds of something failing are really, really low. So you never want to replace any kind of tool that you buy. But I think, what's more important than that is just making sure you buy the right one.
Got it. And so when you look at the market for sales engagement, there must be a lot of white space because, these other companies are raising huge valuations and there's new upstarts, coming into the market. Yeah. So are there a lot of licenses yet to be sold of sales engagement? Because
I think
it seems
so.
like, in the SDR world, like if you don't have it, you're not very hip,
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah. Am I just in a bubble here, or you still see a lot of white space?
No, there's a big bubble. There's a lot of users that can be sold sales enablement, and whether they're SDRs or BDRs or account executives, or even support staff, right? They're all candidate for this kind of technology. And as this technology grows and adds additional features, you're going to add them to more licenses. So I think there's plenty of white space out there. This is a new marketplace that is growing. It's got a lot of growth in it. You're seeing a lot of VC money be spent on this marketplace, and the sky's the limit, I think, right now. And there's some competitors, but there's not a lot of them that I see. It's not like security software. There's a barrier to entry here, right? This takes time to develop and build out. So, there's a good amount of competitors in this space, but it's not overloaded, put it that way.
Yeah, that's so funny. I just chuckled because, we used to go, I was in the security space for a couple of years, and we'd go to RSA and there'd be 600 vendors in the, walk around expo. And it's like, how the hell do you keep track of all these and know the difference? I guess that's why there's Gartner, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And frankly, Gartner doesn't cover the space yet, right? I think they will here in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And the strong will survive. And I think in this space, you've got, dozens of good competitors compared to the security space where you've got hundreds and thousands of competitors. So it's a good place to be.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's an evergreen problem. Everybody needs new pipeline. They need new appointments. They need new customers. And you could sell it, to the BDRs, the sales reps, the customer success. I mean, it's going to be interesting. And, it's funny because I mentioned Gartner, but the hip thing now is like G2 Crowd, or they have their own, magic quadrant that's made from reviews. And so it's interesting when you think about, there's not necessarily like a analyst coverage for this, or maybe there is, but it's more crowdsourced, Magic Quadrant, and you see where people land. So it's going to be interesting. Neil, this has been amazing. Thank you for going through, the landscape with us. And how do we get in touch with you if folks want to learn more about Revenue Grid or connect with you?
Yeah, Dave, thanks. So I'll give you my email address. Probably the best way to contact me. It would be Neil, Neil, .ringers, RINGERS, @revenuegrid.com.
Perfect. Okay. We will put a link in the comments below. Everybody, thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast. And Neil, thanks for coming on. We'll see you over on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for hosting me. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, with your host, David Delaney. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. Your support makes our show possible. If you are struggling with your sales development program, contact us at tenbound.com for a no-obligation exploratory call. Again, that's tenbound.com.